Dr. Temple, is it okay if we start?
Yes, we can start. I was just working on a journal article.
No,
Okay,
no
that's fine.
problem.
We'll start now. I'll put it away.
Great. So I will just give in a brief introduction.
Okay, great.
Great. So today, on World Autism Awareness Day, it is a great honor to welcome the legendary Dr. Temple Grandin for the third time in collaboration with Autism Connect. Dr. Temple Grandin is a distinguished author, speaker, and advocate for individuals with autism. Her pioneering contributions to animal science, coupled with her profound insights into autism, have touched and inspired countless lives globally. Prepare for another enlightening and empowering session as we commemorate World Autism Awareness Day with the legendary Dr. Temple Grandin. Thank you so much.
It's really good to be here tonight by Zoom. And I'm a professor of animal science at Colorado State University. In fact, I've been there for 34 years. And I had no speech until age 4. I had very severe symptoms as a very young child. Now, fortunately, I did not have any sign of epilepsy. That's usually a good sign. I got into a very good early educational program. Speech therapy. It was 2 teachers just worked out of their home. They were really good teachers. And there were 3 things that my program, what the goals were: speech, learning how to wait and take turns at games. These kids have got to learn how to inhibit a response. So you might start engaging an autistic kid who's spinning a coin. We're going to take turns spinning the coin. And then skills, dressing, brushing their teeth, just basic skills. There was no emphasis on eye contact. I think some programs put way too much emphasis on that. That just overloads the sensory system. So when they worked with me on speech, the adults talked slowly, because when it went too fast, it blah, 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 blah. So my speech teacher, she'd hold up a cup like this, and she'd say cup the regular way, and then she'd say cup. And I was always encouraged to use my words. Now you've got to wait for these kids to respond. Now, like a phone with really bad service, and it's got poor service, you have to give it time to download a web page. It's a slow processing speed. Give them time to respond. But always encourage a child to use his words. Like maybe the child wants candy or something like that. Then get them to say the word, and then you'll give it to them. So there was a lot of emphasis on that. And another method that was used with me was teachable moments. After I learned speech, if I put my fingers into food that you don't normally eat with your fingers. I know they like spinach in India, and that would not be, they'd be very bad manners to eat that with your fingers. And instead of screaming no, they would say use the utensil. They give the instruction on what to do. Say, okay, let's say I reached when I should have asked somebody to pass a serving dish. My mother would say, well, wait for your sister to pass it. She would give the instruction instead of screaming no. That is really important. And the worst thing that you could do with little autistic kids is let them just play with the phone all day and tune out the world. That's what they should not be doing. You also need to be getting these kids out shopping. Mother used to take me shopping, and I would help put things in the cart. And she'd say, well, you know, we like oranges. Go get the oranges and put them in the cart. Turning shopping, and she'd take me to the store when it was not real busy. But we need to get these kids out doing things. There's a tendency to keep them kind of too sheltered. Now, what about sensory? Some autistic kids have a real problem with loud noise, like car horns. Now, things like this can be better tolerated if the child beeps the horn. In other words, take the kid out to the car and have them beep the horn, or some other noisy thing like a vacuum cleaner. Let the child turn that thing on. Then it's going to be a whole lot less scary. I hated balloons when I was a child because I didn't like them popping. Now, what should have been done is to get some balloons, and we'll blow it up just really small like this. And I'd pop it and there'd be no sound. Then make it bigger, and then I pop it. I initiate it. And that often makes it easier to tolerate. Now, sometimes kids will wear ear protectors all the time. Now, the problem with that is if you wear an ear protector all the time, it will make the sound sensitivity worse. Now, I was just on a call with some college students that were autistic, and what about fire alarms? Because they often, I was in a hotel 2 weeks ago, and fire alarm went off 3 times. That's a place for to put the earphones on. So have them with you. Don't wear them all the time. When it's quiet, you need to take them off because you don't want to make sound sensitivity worse. But the train station, really noisy places, yeah, you can put the ear protectors on. But you don't want to be wearing them all the time. But what you can do is have them with you. You see, it gives you control. You have them with you. So if I'm at the airport and one of the door alarms goes off and they sound really horrible, you can put the ear protectors on. Or the train station, yes, that's a place where you might wear them. But try not to wear them all the time because I have talked to families where a child wore ear protectors all the time and they got so sensitive that normal quiet conversation in the house they couldn't tolerate. Well, you don't want to have that happen. And what happens is the brain tries to compensate for the headphones. And I don't know if you ever had wax taken out of your ears, then after the wax is taken out, things sound really super loud. So have them with you. So there's really noisy stuff. A lot of cars beeping horns, you could put it on. But sometimes a kid will find that maybe he beeps the horns all the time. He's going to like beeping car horns. He'll like beeping them so much it's going to bother everybody else. So those sound sensitivity. Another problem is sometimes LED lights flicker. Now, this might be a problem for maybe 10, 20% of people with autism or dyslexia, is LED lights that flicker. So what you can do is you take out your phone and you put it in slow motion video. And you take video of the lights, and the bad lights will flicker. And you use the regular slow motion setting, not ultra slow motion, regular slow motion setting. And there's a lot of different things that can make them flicker. And it's not always the cheap ones that flicker. Sometimes expensive ones can flicker. Dimmer switches sometimes is an issue, but you need to find some that don't flicker. So what do we do if we're in a house or an office and or school, and you've got really horrible LED lights? Well, if you got windows, open up the windows and try not to use them. If you don't have windows and you have horrible LEDs that flicker, what can sometimes help is to go out and buy a lamp that has an LED that you really like in it, that does not flicker, and put that next to the child's desk. And that's something simple. I like to think of simple things that people can do. Now, there's also a problem with some people, not everybody with autism, but sometimes people with head injuries, dyslexia, or autism. There's a subgroup that where the print will sort of jiggle. Like white paper with a black background, the print will jiggle. Now, one of the things that sometimes can really help that is printing the work on light colored paper, like this book right here, just pale colored. This Barry Prezant's book, that's a nice book, and it's got kind of a pale light blue cover. So you might just try printing light blue paper, light lavender paper, light gray, light tan. Also experiment with different colored backgrounds on computers. Experiment with different fonts. You might try a light blue background, try a gray background. Some people really like the Amazon's old-fashioned Kindle because it has kind of a gray background. Or you just use colored paper. And I have seen this really work. I actually have seen it save some college careers. Very simple intervention, the colored paper. And then what about clothing that's itchy? Like I go out and I bought some new pants. I like Walmart's black pants. But I have to wash them 3 times before I get them to where they won't itch on a plane. If I'm going to be on a long plane ride, and I spend a lot of time on the planes, I just can't stand itchy pants. And I've got to have soft things against my skin. Now, other shirts, I wear t-shirts under, that. But I've got to have soft things against my skin. And let the child maybe pick out some things. But brand new clothes often are itchy, and if you just wash them first, that can help. I'm trying to just give you simple things that you can do to help with, some of these sensory issues. Now, another thing I'm very interested in, and this is my new book, Visual Thinking. It's my new book. I also have another book called The Autistic Brain. And in both of these books, I talk about different kinds of thinking. Now, this is going to show up in older kids, like 6, 7, and 8. And some individuals are what's called an object visualizer. That's me. All my memories are like those little phone pictures that move a little bit. And I can search through my memory. And it's associative thinking. We were having a discussion this morning about dogs slipping on the floor. And I suggested putting a plastic runner down so they wouldn't slip on it. So then I started looking at other floors. Dogs were walking on the floors at the airport. Now I'm seeing all the airport dogs. And now I can get into it, go from dogs to aviation. You see, it's associative thinking. And now I'm seeing different dogs, a really nice brown pointer I saw there, and a little black fluffy dog. And but these come up as pictures, not as words. So the kinds of jobs, and we got to start thinking about jobs that I'd be good at: mechanical. You've got a lot of motorbikes in India. A perfect job for a visual thinker would be fixing motorbikes. If you're good at fixing motorbikes, you will have a job for life. And motorbikes are not going to go away. And they're going to work with engines, I think, for the foreseeable future. And so mechanical things. Visual thinkers are good at art, mechanics, photography, and working with animals. Those are things that visual thinkers are good at. Now, another kind of mind is your math mind, your music and math mind. They think patterns, not pictures, patterns. These are your computer programmers, your chemists. And there's a lot of people working professionally in a lot of different fields that are autistic. I was reading an article this morning about a French mathematician, brilliant in math, just won an award. He was terrible at trying to figure out French grammar. You see, this is where the mathematicians sometimes have a problem. See, one of the problems you can have in autism is good at one thing, terrible at something else. And I want to take the thing that the person's good at and build it into an employable skill. So for my kind of mind, fixing things. Now, we're always going to have to fix things. And for the mathematical kind of mind, anything to do with programming computers. Now, a third type of autistic mind is the facts person. They often love history. They love facts. Now, the kinds of jobs that they've been really good at is what I call specialized retail. Okay, I went into Walmart. They had 10 different kinds of phones there, 5 different kinds of calling plans. And you go, well, somebody who's a word fact person can help somebody pick out the right calling plan, the right phone, not try to make them buy the most expensive stuff, but help them to pick out the right phone. There have been very, very good successes with selling cars. That's been very successful. This has been something that's been real successful. These are your word thinkers. They love facts about sports, everything about football. They'll know it. There's been real successes in selling bank financial products. There's actually 2 cases. They were very successful, hired by a bank. Another case was selling specialized business insurance and help a small business pick out the right insurance program. These are things that have actually been successful. Now, one of the problems we got with autism now is we got all these levels. At one end of the spectrum, you got Einstein, no speech until age 3. He would definitely end up in an autism program today. Very, very, very definitely. You can argue about whether he's autistic, but most schools he'd be in an autism program. So at one end, you got Einstein, and at the other end, you've got somebody who never learns to speak and may have epilepsy and other problems on top of the autism. So let's say you've got an older child now that doesn't speak. Let's try working on getting them to type on a tablet. And you need to use a tablet because when you type on the virtual keyboard, the print appears right next to the keyboard. They cannot make the attention shift. Like if I pull out the keyboard here on this desk, it's way down here, and the print appears way up there. They're not able to make this attention shift. That's why tablets work. And you can just use a text messaging program and back out of it, put it in airplane mode so they can't send it. And that can work with just a regular tablet. But some of them can learn to type their needs. Now, let's say you have a nonverbal adult and they're having some behavior problems, screaming and hitting, something like that. There's three things I want to look for in trying to figure out what's causing that. And let's say you have an individual who's been good, and now all of a sudden he's terrible. The thing you want to look for is a hidden, painful medical problem they cannot tell you about. And big number one is tummy aches, acid reflux and tummy aches, constipation. I talked to a man recently when I was on a plane. We were getting ready to leave the gate, and his son had a hidden, painful medical problem, and they didn't realize it. It was something in his sinuses, probably. So it could be a toothache, an earache, a urinary tract infection. So if you have a nonverbal older child or adult who's been good and now all of a sudden is bad, probably a hidden, painful medical they cannot tell you about. You've got to rule that out. The other thing is not being able to communicate is horribly, horribly frustrating, horribly frustrating. And they've got to have a way to communicate, even if it's just a picture board on a piece of cardboard. They've got to have something to communicate with. And then sensory overload. It's happened in the train station. The very, very noisy train coming in. That would be sensory overload. So you have to figure out sort of what is causing that. Now, what I'm saying in a lot of places is we're doing a good job with our little kids, working on the early education. But where we're not doing a good job is getting the child into the world of work. I'm seeing kids that had very, very good academic skills, but they couldn't handle a job. But work skills are different than academic skills. And so I have grandfathers come up to me all the time, grandmothers. They discover they're autistic when the kids get diagnosed. And grandfather's got a great job. And getting diagnosed later in life helped him with his relationships. It was almost a relief. But I'm seeing too many smart, fully verbal kids. Parents overprotect those kids, and they're not learning stuff like shopping. They're not learning doing a task for somebody outside the family. They're getting everything done for them. So my generation, we had paper routes, and so little kids, 11-year-olds, delivered papers. Well, that's gone now. So let's look at things that 11-year-olds could start doing to help learn job skills. And they need to do something on a schedule for somebody who's not family. That is really important. I know in India, you have a whole bunch of little shops, and maybe the 11-year-old, when he gets home from school, can help with sell vegetables or fruit or something like that on the little stand. Just find things in the neighborhood where they're doing something on a schedule, and it's not family. Here in the U.S., walking dogs is something that, can be done. And then when they get a little older, they need to start getting real jobs. And I'd like to see learning how to keep a job before they graduate from high school, because a gradual transition is always much, much better than a sudden transition. Gradual transitions where you're learning more and more and more work skills. Because I've seen individuals graduate from college, high honors, and not able to handle the workplace. And they never had done any work skills. And learning how to just go in a store and shop. There's too many teenagers that've never gone in a store and just bought something. And I was just on a call earlier this evening, and one of the college students, it was autistic college student. So I remember when my mother waited out in the car, and I went into the ice cream shop all by myself and bought an ice cream cone. But she was out there in the car. So, kind of baby steps here. But I'm seeing some real problems with not learning these kinds of skills, and you do it gradually. I had a 12-year-old at the airport come up to me with a mom who wanted a picture taken, and I found out she never shopped. So I gave her a $5 bill, and I said, go in that store across the hall and buy something, and she bought a drink and brought me back the change. But we were right there. It was just across the hall. I'm talking little baby steps here. Another thing that would have really limited my career if I had not learned to drive. Now, one of the problems we've got autism is slow processing. tension shifting, slowness. And so on driving, you need to start out in a totally safe place. Find a giant parking lot at a stadium, like at 6 o'clock in the morning, and nobody's there. And that's where you start to learn how to drive. Because what you want to do is get the operation of the vehicle into automatic. So it's on sort of autopilot. You don't have to think about the brakes. And you start out in the middle of this gigantic parking lot. So if the car lurched, it's not going to hit anything. You start out in this very, very safe place. And it's going to take longer. It's going to take longer. I was very lucky that out on my aunt's ranch, the mailbox was about 6 kilometers away on a dirt road. So I started out on the horse pasture with a manual shift, lurching all around and stalling and stopping. And then every day I drove 12 kilometers up to the mailbox and back. And of course, my aunt was it was an old pickup truck. But that's how I learned how to drive. And I was lucky that that mailbox was so far away, because it was just the perfect practice. 20 minutes out to the mailbox and back. You might see one car on maybe every 5th trip. Now, there are almost no cars. That was a good place to learn how to drive. But the problem we've got in autism is you got such a big spectrum. And it's a true continuous trait. Now, they got rid of the Asperger's, but basically Asperger's was socially awkward, no speech delay. Absolutely socially awkward. And then just a little bit socially awkward. Is that autistic? You see, this is where it's a true continuous trait. When does slightly socially awkward get called autism? Oh, there's plenty of these people around, and they work in the tech industry, and some of them make a lot of money. And I worked with very talented, skilled tradespeople that were inventing mechanical equipment. I worked with them in the beef industry. Very talented, had taken some shop classes in high school, started out doing small jobs, and then they got into big, engineering and building jobs. And there's 2 parts of engineering. There's the mathematical part. That's the university. And then there's what I call the clever engineers. Who keeps the water system running? It's going to be the clever engineers. They just see how pumps work, and they're going to keep them going. And we need people with these skills. Now, one of the things I got asked tonight from the college students was about my identity. Who am I? Well, I'm basically career. And at least in the English language, there are a lot of names that are jobs. Carpenter, baker, cook, smith. Those are jobs. And so my basic identity is, yes, I'm a university professor. The university professor comes before the autism does. Autism is a very important part of me, but the professor comes first. And I like the logical way that I think very logically. I'm kind of appalled from the stuff that goes on in the world. Nasty emotions and bad things that go on. And some of it's controversial, so I'm not going to discuss it. But I'm just appalled from the bad stuff that people do. So what I'd like to do now, let's get some questions up in the chat. I've gone on now for about 21 minutes, and I like answering questions. You can write them in the chat, or all I've got in the chat right now is hello. That's the only thing that's in there. Or ask them on a microphone or something like that, because I like to get questions. I also want to see these kids do everything they can do. And even your non-speaking individuals, a lot of them, they could work in a shop. They could do jobs. Now, here's another thing on jobs. Long strings of verbal instruction do not work. I need a pilot's checklist. And so let's say I have to clean a food machine in a restaurant. So there might be steps to disassemble it, to clean it, then put it back together. Give me pilot's checklist with bullet points. I need an external working memory. And pilots are required to use it. I like to watch aviation videos. I watched a video last night. Pilots didn't do the checklist, and they put the wrong weight into the computerized system. They put the weight of the plane in, it's too light. and the automatic system didn't give enough thrust, and they nearly took the tail off the plane. Really, really serious. And they had not done the checklist. Okay, the text messaging or the AAC app, do whatever you like. You know, use the one that works. The only reason I mentioned the text messaging is every phone has it. And I'm always trying to give low-cost suggestions. I'm not sure what the AAC app costs. If it's free, yeah, go ahead and use it. But there's a lot of very expensive stuff out there when you could use Microsoft Word that you already have. And phones everybody has. And I remember I went to a disability conference with a big corporation. It was an airline, actually. And we went to dinner, and I went to dinner with a deaf person. And I don't know any sign language. You know what we did? We passed my phone back and forth. We didn't send the texts. We just passed my phone back and forth texting. And we got laughing, and we had a really good time. We just used a phone, which everybody has. What careers would I recommend for an autistic individual? My kind of thinker. Art is a really good career. Another really good career would be fixing motorcycles. I know you have a lot of motorcycles in India, and they're going to need fixing. The electric scooters that they have here, people break those all the time. They've got to be fixed. But mechanic, art and mechanics go together. And then photography is another thing that my kind of mind be good at. And then you have your mathematical mind. They are running the computer companies. We are using Zoom right now. Who do you think made Zoom? The autistic brain made Zoom. If we didn't have autism, we wouldn't have this computer. We wouldn't have Zoom. The autistic brain makes this stuff. And then my kind of autistic brain is going to keep the water system running. Okay, you want to have some water along with the computers. Just don't put the two together. And then the other kind of autistic person is the one that this is the one that might know all the football, everything about football players, everything about movies, you know, his favorite genre of movies. They work very well in what I call specialized retail. And selling phones. I talked to you about the Walmart, where all these different phones, all these different calling plans. Where do you start? Well, a good salesperson isn't going to try to sell you the most expensive calling plan and the most expensive phone. They'll pick out the right thing for you. I was in the office supply store today. I had to buy a printer cartridge for my printer, and there's all these printers there. Well, what's the right printer for a small office? I don't need this big, gigantic printer. I just need a small one. So those are some examples of jobs. And let's look at jobs to avoid. Rapid multitasking. Chaos at a takeout window at McDonald's. I'd avoid that. A chaotic store during the holidays. Rapid multitasking, I would avoid. But for the fully verbal, there's all kinds of careers. I've worked with writers that I'm pretty sure that were autistic. I've worked with people that could fix anything. But the other thing is kids have to be exposed to things. Let's say my kind of mind never got exposed to fixing a motorcycle, I wouldn't get interested in motorcycles. You've got to be exposed. And if you're not exposed to things, then how can you get interested? See, now a real common interest is vehicles. Trains, airplanes, cars. That's really, really common because they like to watch them move. Now, let's say a child, likes a certain kind of car. Now, what you want to do with that fixation on that car is broaden it. Don't try to stamp it out. Broaden it. Let's read about that car. Let's learn how the motor works. We can learn some physics with the car. We can do some math with this car. Take it and broaden it so it's not so fixated. When I was young, I would just draw the same horse head over and over and over again. And mother would say, let's draw the whole horse. Let's draw its saddle. Well, you see, now the questions I'm getting here are very top-down. See, verbal thinkers, top-down, vague. You see, my mind works in specific examples. and then I take specific examples and put them into categories on a spreadsheet. And one of the supports that's needed all the time is the pilot's checklist. For any task that involves a sequence. Okay, like let's say I got to close down the cash register at this store. There might be 5 or 6 steps. Put them down in a pilot's checklist format. The pilots have to use it every flight. And I just saw a disastrous flight on YouTube where they nearly took the tail off a plane because they didn't do the checklist and they entered the weight of the whole loaded aircraft too light. That should have been caught on the checklist, and they didn't do it. And you know what the airline did with those pilots? They fired them. And they didn't take the tail off the airplane. They were but they damaged it a whole lot. And they fired those pilots because they did not use the checklist. But that's a very, very easy support. And I have found that when people have lost jobs, and they lost jobs because the boss went yakety yak, 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 and then they did the wrong things. One of them was an electrician's apprentice, installing, he was installing different things, light fixtures, switches, receptacles to plug in, into the power. And the boss went yak, 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 and he installed the wrong switches in the wrong places, and the boss fired him. Now, if they had just written down the things that the dimmer switch goes in the living room, and this brass fixture goes this place, and this glass fixture goes over there, then they wouldn't have been fired. You see, they need that external working memory. Now, the pilot's checklist will save a lot of jobs, and it's a very simple intervention, and it's come up over and over and over again. Okay, your daughter's interested in genetics. Well, there's research done on genetics. There's, doctors that work on genetics. There's a lot of different things you could do with that. Probably going to be better for more of a mathematical mind. Okay, somebody mentioned that they really liked the pilot checklist. Okay, here's the problem of picky eating, of not eating many things, no meat or vegetables. Now, I get concerned with these very, very restricted diets of getting vitamin deficiency diseases. I know we used to teach in what used to call home economics. Well, we learned that a vitamin C deficiency causes scurvy, and then the B deficiencies cause really nasty things. And I'm very worried about this. And in fact, I know a young man who got scurvy because he wasn't taking enough vitamin C. And they started giving him a vitamin supplement, and it went away. But I get very concerned, and some of the B vitamin diseases are even nastier. You don't want this stuff. And so what I recommend usually in the United States, if they're a real picky eater, is take a 1-a-day decent, good multiple vitamin. You don't want to get these old-fashioned, dreadful diseases that the doctors don't know how to diagnose. And they took it, and this was a young autistic adult, nonverbal, got scurvy. I went through his whole diet, and I figured out it was a deficient vitamin C. They started giving him C supplements. It cleared right up. It was scurvy. The doctor didn't know what it was. Yeah. Now, what can we do to encourage them to eat more things? One thing to do is get them involved in food preparation. When you're out in the kitchen, you can play in it. That sometimes helps. Finger foods, no meat or vegetables. My worried here, my antenna echo enough about vitamin deficiencies. This could be a big problem. We had a kid that here, it was ice cream and French fries is all he ate. Well, that's just atrocious. Now, let's get a vitamin into him. Now, I'm concerned if there's no meat, is he getting enough protein? this would be a problem in a young child. If he's getting some dairy, then he'd probably be getting enough protein. But I'm concerned of the child's health, some of these very, very restricted diets. And what do I think about group homes? Well, we have to look at, you got different levels of autism. Now, for some individuals, a good group home might be a good choice. See, they vary in quality from being really good to being really terrible. Because one of the problems is what happens when the parents get old. And this is something they often don't want to think about. The parents are 60, 70 years old, getting health problems. The child's going to outlive the parents. But group homes vary from terrible to really good. But I want to see the fully verbal ones out working. It makes me happy when a parent comes up to me at the airport and said, well, my kid got a job and bought a house because it's something they read in one of my books. That makes me happy. You see that often we underestimate what they can do. But I'm seeing lots of times we might have a child that's academically really advanced and they don't know how to go shopping. They haven't learned to budget money, have a bank account. Just really important things for living. The good group home has a lot of activities and things for them to do. Now, I've seen the full range from excellent to bad. That's why you've got to go check these places out. Another thing that's an issue, way too many medications given out. Little kids on 6 or 7 different drugs. That's terrible. There's a place for medication. I've been on antidepressants for years for anxiety. They've really helped me. And I'd recommend, if you're really anxious, reading Thinking in Pictures. Even though it's old, it's still accurate. The drugs haven't changed. There's been no breakthroughs in totally new drugs. Okay, he scripts. Okay, let me just look at this. Refused to leave the house. Well, last few speech in scripts. Okay, now this is another thing. There's 3 ways that the brain can have a problem with language. There's just 3 ways. I had some auditory processing problems. So sometimes when the grown-ups talked fast, it sounded, oh, that's what grown-ups, adults sound like. They talk fast. That's auditory processing. So some don't speak because they never could hear it clearly, and they're not deaf. Another problem, and I had some of this, is I couldn't get it out. It was like a stutter. But then you have the kid that will yak out a whole movie script, but they don't know what it means. So let's say they're scripting something off a movie. Try to take some of those lines and work it into a real situation where the words make sense. Then the child may understand that that word has meaning. There's a book called Life Animated. Now, what was done there was a kid memorized a Disney movie, and they found some lines in that they could work into real world conversation. And that's how the child learn to talk. Okay, how can you encourage my child's interest and strengths? Well, let's look at what the interest is. Now, the different kinds of thinking, like the visual thinking, these are the kids that like art and mechanical, and the math kids like math. So let's say you have a kid who's really super good at math and he's in primary school, move him ahead. Don't have him be bored doing baby math. Move them ahead. Well, you can develop, you see, these are very verbal questions I'm getting. I can think of all kinds of ways that I could build on the strength and develop skills. But you see, it's all specific, going back to the dogs. Okay, I'm now in my airport dog file. And I'm seeing a lot of, little white fluffies. I'm seeing the dogs that security uses. You got some really nice pointers. You see, it's specific. There's, I'm seeing a white poodle that was on one of my flights. Big white poodle and a Saint Bernard in the front row of one of my planes. He laid along the bulkhead. He was perfect, quiet for the whole flight. You see, that's specific. And I also tend to remember the ones that are really unique. A Saint Bernard on a plane, that's unique compared to various little poodles on a plane. So I tend to remember the ones that are unique. There was a little black dog they used in security. He used to, when he had his time off, he'd go play around at the United Airlines 1K desk. But you see, that's something specific. And he did have time off where he wasn't working. But that's something specific. You see, my thinking is very specific. And I can think of all, visual thinkers, the kinds of jobs, art. But one thing they got to learn how to do with their art is they have to learn how to do art on assignment. Okay, because let's say making the latest anime character, the latest Indian movie character, most people don't want that. So you have to learn how to do art that other people want. See, that's part of working skills. Okay, you're selling phones at Walmart. You've got to sell phones at Walmart, not talk endlessly about Indian movies. Because your job there is to sell phones. See, one thing about my mother is she always knew kind of just how hard to stretch me. Not put me into some chaos where, I wouldn't be able to handle it. Let's see some of these other questions. So it doesn't matter if he doesn't speak. Well, the thing is, yeah, of course, I'd like to have a kid speak, but I also want to, at the same time, encourage art. But let's say a kid's 7 or 8 years old, probably not going to speak. Well, I want to start working on the typing. Because there's a lot of them that can learn how to type. Oh, great, he's got solo art exhibitions. That's just great. That's wonderful. That's good. See, Mother had a really good sense of the things that I would be capable of doing. Another thing that helped was 50s upbringing, where no matter where children went in the 50s, adults corrected little kids. Like, let's say we were in a shop and I touched too much stuff. The shopkeeper would say, only touch the things you're going to buy. They'd give the instruction rather than screaming at them. I mean, first of all, you see, like a lot of these questions, they're very vague. Okay, here's another example. When I was in 3rd grade, I was 8 years old. I did not know how to read. Mother taught me reading. Just let's find a book that's worth reading. We had The Wizard of Oz, and I learned how to read that book out loud and sound out my words. That's something very specific that she did, because both my teacher and my mother were very concerned. I'm 8 years old. I did not know how to read. And so I was one of the kids that worked well with phonics. You see, then you have to think about what kind of support does a kid need? One kid may need to have a classroom where the LED lights are not flashing on and off. That's probably the #1 problem you can have with a classroom environment. You see, but this is very general. You see, verbal thinking is very top-down, overgeneralized. See, what over the years, I've looked at all these specific cases, and the pilot's checklist has come up over and over and over again. And that would save a lot of jobs. Well, one of the areas I would like to see research on is treatments for the sensory issues. Methods to use to desensitize. There's a paper called Environmental Enrichments, an Effective Treatment for Autism. And this maybe seems to help. And it desensitizes some of the sensory stuff. And you stimulate 2 senses at once, so you might smell cinnamon and touch a cold water glass. I'd like to see a lot more done on working on how to desensitize some of the sensory issues. I wish they'd do research on that instead of just describing them. Yeah, we know they're a problem. We don't need to be describing them. But that's something that's where I would put research in, is trying to figure out good protocols. And some stuff you can desensitize, but there's other stuff where there's a point where coarse wool against my skin. No, 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 no. And Claudia's found it helping move into more functional speech. Trying to. Yeah, you see, I have an easier time helping you to solve the problem if you simply would just explain what the task is. See, because I only think specific. I'm thinking dogs at the airport, white poodle, middle seat and coach, has blood underneath the seat, behaved very well behaved. Then the flight attendant told me about the chihuahuas running around in the aisle. I didn't see those, but I can imagine them. You know, and then there's other dogs I don't really remember, but they have some kind of special about them. I remember them. But you see, it's specific. And as far as dog behavior goes, most of the behavior at the airport's been excellent. No, because they got to see the ticket agent when they check in. And it's one of the reasons why it's been excellent. There's no cell phone check-in for doggies. They have to go to a ticket agent. Memory's extraordinary. Well, you see, it's very important that parents and the school be on the same page. My mother and Mrs. Deach, my third grade teacher, would have phone conversations once or twice a week on how to work with me. Yeah, the memory is good memory is something that they're good at. The other thing I often hear is his behavior is horrible at school. I hear this, and wonderful at home, or just the opposite. Behavior at home is terrible, and behaves well at school. Well, this is where the parents and teachers need to get together and do the things they're doing that gets the good behavior. But I've heard this all the time. Oh, he's a little angel at school, and he's tearing everything up at home. Or it's the other way around. The school, he's, acting really bad at school and being really good at home. See, one of the things I'm looking at these questions here, a lot of very, very highly verbal thinking. See, math thinking and my kind of picture thinking, it's specific. You know how you can go through your pictures and then you click on one of those pictures and it moves a little bit? That's how my memories are. And the unique dogs at the airport get remembered. And one more little gray fluffy thing. I probably didn't bother to take a picture of it. Because I don't remember everything I see. I don't remember every hotel room. Because I could care less. I only remember really awful and really weird. Those are hotel rooms that get remembered. Yeah, I remember one hotel, and we're never staying there again. They served breakfast in a cardboard pint ice cream container. I'm going, no. I now see their logo. I go, no, we're not staying there. But it's specific. 16-year-old, okay, now the thing on masking is, what would be difficult for me is to be in high-speed chit-chat conversations and try to follow them. That'd be very, very tiring for me to follow. But on the other hand, you can say good morning to people and please and thank you. I'm going to call that a little bit of business social. And again, autism is a continuous trait. There's no black and white dividing line between slightly nerdy and autistic. This is the problem. Okay, now where I had friends who shared interests. Autistics get friends doing stuff, like when I was in college even, I got some bullying, and I went in a school variety show, and I made scenery, and I sung a silly song. When I was in high school, I was in the Model Rocket Club. This was something where I could have friends who shared interest. That's where these kids are gonna, well, what age can you determine what kind of thinker you are? Oh, 6, 7, and 8 usually. Now, you usually can't tell in 3-year-olds, but 6, 7, and 8, I was maybe 7 when my drawing ability really started showing up. I remember a Valentine I painted in kindergarten. That was just little kids' crummy art. But they will gravitate. Let's say you expose children to musical instruments. Well, they'll either be good at them or terrible at them. I had a little flute. I never could figure out how to play the flute. But you got to expose kids to see what they gravitate towards. If you don't expose, I'm seeing kids that are really good at making things with Legos, they never graduate the tools. I think that's terrible. Well, let's get her in some situation where there's an activity. Now, a lot of autistics are awkward, are physically awkward. I could never get really good at sports because I was just kind of clumsy and klutzy. Now, there's some exception to that, but I was one of the klutzes, clumsy. But some autistics might be good at sports. Okay, that's something you can do together with friends. But let's take something like robotics club. And here in the US, we have a lot of robotics clubs. Oh, I would have loved robotics. And I would have built the robot and somebody else has to program it. You see, that's the different kinds of minds working together. Mathematician programs it, my kind of mind builds it. Now, I would have loved being in a robotics club. Just would have loved that. But that's friends who have shared interests. For another kid, we've had some very good successes with child was in the local public school in the school band. He loved being in the school band. He was one of the music kids. Okay, friends who shared interests. Help her learn teamwork and cooperation. I'm going to ask you, what is this girl good at? Yeah, I'd say around 7 or 8, you can usually start to tell what kind of thinker they are. But again, let's say you have a child with good musical ability. If you don't expose them to instruments and singing, how would you know they have musical ability? You have to expose to things in order to find out what they might be good at. And if you never, I had a little flute. I couldn't play it. Some of the kids are going to pick that flute up and just play it. Pick that guitar up, just figure out how to play it. But they've got to be exposed to it. Well, the thing, of course, this whole thing of masking is, you can do things where I'm not hypersocial. I like to talk about, I sat next to a lady construction manager, and we talked about concrete forming systems for bridges for an entire flight. Now, that was a really, really good flight. That's kind of stuff I find extremely interesting. And this bridge that fell down, that was horrible. Okay, let's look at ABA. There's some really bad ABA, and there's some good ABA. In the bad ABA, they would get in the kid's face like this, force eye contact. My program didn't do that. Okay, I go back to the things like, what do we want to get out of the therapy? Let's start with the little kid, the 3-year-old. I want speech, turn taking, learning to wait, take turns, and skills. And there's a 4th thing I should have. The child should love going to therapy. You should get progress, and the child loves going to therapy. If the child hates therapy, then something's wrong. And there was some old-fashioned, really bad ABA, and some of these advocates got driven into sensory overload, and it was bad. Also, once a kid gets older and talking, there's a point you get rid of the ABA type of stuff. They don't need it. Or you just want to force compliance and make them do some stupid little task, put pegs on a board or something that's totally boring. Why are you doing that? No, there was some bad ABA, and I think they're switching things. The thing I look at if I'm looking at little kids programs is the child should like going to therapy. Am I getting progress? What do I want out of 4-year-olds? I want speech, I want turn taking, and skills, dressing, Just all these skills. Putting shoes on. Just all kinds of skills. And so when parents say, now, are we doing the right kind of therapy? I ask, is your child progressing? Now, one thing that's not enough, 1 hour of therapy a week is not sufficient. You've got to do more than 1 hour a week. But let's say you had 1 hour a week access to a professional therapist. You could then get some grandmothers in the community to work with the child and use that professional as a coach and consult with that professional every week. No, these kids need more than 1 hour of therapy a week. The other thing I'm seeing with some of the fully verbals I don't really like, it's like autism totally defines them. And these college students today, I don't know, the college professor comes first. You know, we were just discussing today, I was discussing with the department head, how to get some of my students to finish their theses. Do I have for parents and caregivers of children on the autism spectrum? Thought I already gave you a lot of advice. See, what a lot of these questions, well, the ABA thing is specific, but very top down. They say, well, we got to have some supports at work. Okay, now I've given you some supports. Pilot's checklist, get rid of the lights that flicker. Clear instructions. One thing you don't do is say, oh, well, you were rude to customers. You have to be very, very specific and say, well, calling a customer a fat slob is totally unacceptable, and don't ever do that again. You don't ever call a customer a fat slob. Okay, that's being specific. Vague doesn't work. You're rude to customers. They have to be told much more explicitly what they did wrong. When we talked about the thinker, that's going to show up around 7 or 8 usually. Oh, wait, we just got a new message there. Well, you tend to have more autism in boys. Now, sometimes in girls, it just doesn't show up as much. It's not as obvious. Girls might be better at covering it up. Girls tend to be better at language. Autism is mostly genetic. It's inherited. They'll often run in families, especially if you put 2 autistic parents together. No, it's mostly genetics. And boys tend to have it more than girls. Also, what's been happening in the US, I mean, right now, the Centers for Disease Control says it's 1 in 36. You know, like, I don't know, a few years ago, it was 1 in 60, something like that. I think some of this is increased detection. And I think all the endless time that kids are playing with phones and watching endless videos, that's hurt their social life. And no, we need to get them off the phones. In fact, I was just at a 5th grade class this morning. There wasn't a phone in sight. No, there's a time, you know, an hour a day on looking at TikTok or whatever, that's plenty. No, we don't ban it. I don't believe in banning it, but you got to control it. Same thing with video games. You limit it. I don't know, mother used to say to me, well, go outside and play, and we'd go hunt grasshoppers or something, or we'd go find daisies and make chains out of them. We found that we just made up all kinds of stuff to do outside. Kids need to be doing more of that stuff. In fact, I've got a book called Calling All Minds. It's all my children's projects when I was a little kid. Here it is right here. Calling All Minds. Kids projects to do, making kites, things like that. I love that kind of stuff. Should those 4 things be at school? Which 4 things are they talking about? I don't know what 4 things they're talking about. I'm sorry. But you see, I'm the kind of person I love like, okay, that bridge fell down. I was kind of shocked at how so much of it fell apart when it got hit. That's going to be a mess to build back up. How do we prevent something like that from happening? Again, it's going to take 2 years to rebuild that bridge. Right now, they got cranes in there. They're getting all the steel out of the water so the ships can go through there. The ship ran out of power, and that was a screw up. You know, these are the kinds of things that a visual thinker would be good at preventing. They'd had some tugs out there that wouldn't have run into the bridge. The tugs could have stopped it. They had no power. The steering didn't work on the ship anymore. And it hardly, you know, it just knocked a few containers off of it. But you see, my kind of mind is interested in that sort of stuff. I want to prevent stuff like that. But you see, we need to have people more see, I'm like more interested in that than I am in social stuff. See, let's look at all the people of the world. Half the people of the world are probably more social, but the other half, the more the techies. And let's figure out something so that never happens again. A container ship never hits a bridge like that ever again. You see, the autistic person's getting more likely to care about that. The verbal thinkers care about it after it wrecked the bridge. Now they can't get to work because the bridge is wrecked. My kind of mind thinks about it before it happens. And in my book on visual thinking, I talked about the Fukushima accident. They needed a visual thinker to put watertight doors on it. They didn't have them to protect the electric emergency cooling pump. Okay, are we going to end now? Okay. I don't hear you now.
Thank you so much, Doctor.
Okay, well, it's been great talking to everybody. And what inspired me to become an advocate? Well, I just got invited to some meetings. The other thing is I'm 76 years old. I've had a very interesting career doing a lot of engineering stuff. And I want to see these kids that are different get out and be successful. Get out in good jobs. I tell business people we need the skills. We need mechanics who can fix things. We need people who can program computers. These are all things that we need. And a good bunch of those people have some autism traits. You can thank autism for giving us Zoom right now. See, a brain can be more social or a brain can be more technical. Because you got to have people that care about this stuff too. Well, I guess I'll sign off, but it's been great talking to everybody. I'm going to go to bed. I've got some conferences tomorrow, and then I got to go to the airport.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm going to be visiting with one of my former students tomorrow night. It's going to be very nice to visit with her.
Super.
Okay, well, it's been great to talk to everybody. And I'm going to leave the meeting now, and thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Have a good day.
You are welcome. Okay, yeah, bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.